Some men are remembered for what they accomplished, others for what they attempted, and a few are remembered for the gap between their vision and their ability to execute it. Benjamin Siegel was that third kind of man. They called him Bugsy, though never to his face. The nickname suggested something unstable, something dangerous barely contained beneath a charming surface. And it was accurate. Benjamin Siegel was all of those things. He was a killer, a bootlegger, a racketeer, a founding member of the organization that would become known as Murder Incorporated, a man who enforced mob will with violence and intimidation. But he was also a dreamer, a man who looked at a stretch of desert highway in Nevada and saw something that didn't exist yet, something glamorous, something that would change American entertainment forever. He saw Las Vegas, not as it was in the 1940s, a dusty railroad town with a few gambling halls, but as it could be, as it should be, a destination, a paradise, a place where luxury and vice combined into something irresistible. Benjamin Siegel tried to build that vision. He poured millions of dollars, most of it belonging to dangerous men, into creating the Flamingo Hotel, the first true luxury resort on what would become the Las Vegas Strip. He failed, spectacularly. The opening was a disaster. The budget spiraled out of control. His mob backers grew furious. His life, already lived on the edge of violence, moved toward an inevitable conclusion. June 20th, 1947. Beverly Hills. A gunshot through a window. Benjamin Siegel died instantly, one eye literally blown out of his head. The murder was professional, brutal, and never officially solved. But his vision survived. The Flamingo, after his death, became profitable. Other casinos followed the template he'd established. The Las Vegas Strip rose from the desert exactly as Benjamin had imagined it. He was a gangster who helped build modern Las Vegas. A violent criminal who somehow understood what American tourists wanted before they knew they wanted it. A man whose greatest achievement came after his death, built on foundations he'd laid but would never see completed. This is the story of Benjamin Siegel, Bugsy, the man who dreamed in neon and died before the dream could save him. From the streets of Brooklyn to the glamour of Hollywood to a stretch of desert highway outside Las Vegas to a living room in Beverly Hills where his life ended in violence, this is that story. The story of ambition without discipline, vision without execution, dreams built on blood money and mob alliances that could turn deadly in an instant. The story of how Las Vegas became Las Vegas, and the man who paid for that transformation with his life. Chapter 1. Brooklyn Streets and the Making of a Gangster. February 28, 1906. Brooklyn, New York. A boy was born to Jewish immigrants from Galicia, a region in Eastern Europe that had seen more than its share of poverty and persecution. His parents named him Benjamin Hyman Siegelbaum. Later, the family would shorten the surname to Siegel. More American, easier to pronounce, less obviously immigrant. The Siegel family settled in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. This was not the gentrified Brooklyn of today. This was a neighborhood of tenements and poverty, of multiple families sharing cramped apartments, of streets where different ethnic groups competed for space and opportunity. Young Benjamin grew up in an environment where violence was commonplace. Street gangs, ethnic conflicts, the constant pressure of poverty creating desperate competition for resources. School didn't interest him much. He was smart enough, but formal education seemed irrelevant to the world he actually inhabited. The streets taught different lessons, faster lessons, more immediately useful lessons about power, fear, and survival. By his teenage years, Benjamin was already running small-time criminal operations. Protection rackets aimed at street vendors. The basic shakedown, pay us, and we'll make sure nothing bad happens to your pushcart or your inventory. It was crude, street-level crime, but it taught essential skills. How to threaten convincingly, how to follow through when threats didn't work, how to read people and situations, how to project confidence even when you weren't sure what you were doing. Benjamin was also developing a reputation for something that would define him throughout his life. He was beautiful, genuinely, strikingly handsome in a way that was unusual and valuable. In most environments, being pretty might make you a target, but Benjamin combined his looks with absolute willingness to use violence. He was charming until he wasn't, friendly until you crossed him. And then he was terrifying. This combination, charm and violence, beauty and brutality, would serve him well. It made him unpredictable. People couldn't read him easily. They couldn't tell when the smile would turn into a fist, or worse. The nickname Bugsy came from this unpredictability. Bugs, as in crazy, as in bug house, as in someone whose temper and violence could erupt without warning. Benjamin hated the nickname. Hated it enough that very few people dared use it to his face. But behind his back, even people who worked with him, even people who considered themselves his friends, called him Bugsy, because it captured something true about him, something dangerous that lurked beneath the charming exterior. During his late teens, Benjamin met another young man who would change his life. Meyer Lansky. Small, quiet, brilliant with numbers and strategy. Everything Benjamin wasn't. Where Benjamin was impulsive, Meyer was calculating. Where Benjamin was flashy, Meyer was background. Where Benjamin led with violence, Meyer led with planning. They recognized something in each other. Complementary skills. Benjamin could be the face, the enforcer, the intimidating presence. Meyer could be the brain, the strategist, the person who made sure operations actually made money instead of just generating chaos. Together, in the early 1920s, they formed what became known as the Bugs and Meyer mob, a crew that started with small operations but grew quickly during Prohibition. Prohibition. The 18th Amendment. The greatest gift American government ever gave to organized crime. Suddenly, alcohol was illegal. Demand didn't disappear. It just went underground. And someone had to supply that demand. Benjamin and Meyer saw the opportunity. They expanded from street-level protection rackets into bootlegging, hijacking liquor shipments, running gambling operations, building a crew that could handle increasingly sophisticated criminal enterprises. Benjamin's role was clear. He was muscle, but smart muscle. He understood that violence worked best when it was targeted, when it sent messages, when it established reputations that made future violence unnecessary. He also started working as a hitman, contract killings for the emerging organized crime network in New York. This was during the period when Italian and Jewish gangs were beginning to cooperate more systematically, when the old ethnic boundaries were becoming less rigid. Benjamin killed people. We don't know exactly how many. Mob murders often go unreported, uninvestigated, unsolved. But accounts from this period suggest Benjamin was involved in numerous killings, that he was good at it, that he didn't hesitate. This should have made him a pariah, a monster, but somehow it didn't. Benjamin maintained his charm, his friendships, his ability to move through different social circles. He could kill someone on Tuesday and have dinner with their associates on Wednesday, and somehow make both situations feel natural. It was a skill, a terrible skill, but a skill nonetheless. The ability to compartmentalize, to separate business from personal, to be genuinely warm and friendly, while also being someone who could murder you if circumstances required it. By the late 1920s, Benjamin Siegel was an established figure in New York organized crime. Not a boss, but an important player. Someone the bosses relied on. Someone with skills that were valuable to the emerging national crime syndicate. And someone who was about to be part of one of the most important reorganizations in American criminal history. Chapter 2. The Syndicate and the California Dream. The late 1920s and early 1930s saw massive upheaval in organized crime. The old bosses, the ones who clung to traditional hierarchies and old world rules, were being challenged by a younger generation. Charles Luciano, who everyone called Lucky, was leading that challenge. Along with Meyer Lansky and other ambitious young criminals, Luciano envisioned something different. Not individual gangs fighting over territory, but a national organization, a syndicate that could operate across the country with coordination and cooperation. The Castellamarese War erupted, a violent power struggle between old guard Italian bosses in New York. It ended with the deaths of Giuseppe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano, clearing the way for Luciano's vision. Benjamin Siegel was part of the violence that ended the old regime. He was one of the young enforcers who helped Luciano and Meyer reshape organized crime into something more modern, more businesslike. What emerged was the National Crime Syndicate. Not a formal organization with membership cards, but a network, an understanding among major crime figures across the country that cooperation was more profitable than constant warfare. Part of this new structure was an enforcement arm, Murder Incorporated, journalists later called it. A group of hitmen who carried out contract killings on behalf of the syndicate. Professional assassins who could be deployed anywhere in the country when someone needed to be eliminated. Benjamin was associated with Murder Incorporated, though he wasn't one of its primary operatives. He was too visible, too well known. But he worked alongside them. He understood their methods, and he maintained his own willingness to kill when necessary. By the mid-1930s, Benjamin was in his late 20s, he'd survived the bootlegging wars, he'd helped build the syndicate. He was wealthy by the standards of criminals. He had respect and influence. But New York was getting crowded, too many players, too much attention from law enforcement. The smart move was to expand, to find new territory where the syndicate could operate with less competition. California beckoned, specifically Los Angeles, the movie capital, a place where money flowed and where the old Eastern crime families didn't yet have strong footholds. Luciano and Meyer made the decision. Benjamin would go west. He would establish syndicate operations in California. He would be their representative, their enforcer, their face in Hollywood. It was a promotion and an exile at the same time. Benjamin was trusted enough to represent the syndicate, but he was also being moved away from the center of power, sent to the frontier to build something new rather than competing for position in the established New York hierarchy. Benjamin embraced the opportunity. California represented reinvention, a chance to be something more than just another New York gangster. He moved to Los Angeles in the mid-1930s and immediately started building operations. Loan sharking, gambling, union control, protection rackets, all the standard organized crime enterprises. But Benjamin also did something unexpected. He became a celebrity. Hollywood in the 1930s was glamorous, wealthy, and surprisingly open to people with questionable backgrounds. Actors, directors, and producers didn't particularly care if you were a gangster, as long as you were charming and entertaining at parties. And Benjamin was both. He was extraordinarily handsome, well-dressed, funny, charismatic. He could tell stories and make people laugh. He understood how to navigate social situations. He started attending parties with movie stars. He made friends with actors like Cary Grant and George Raft. He dated actresses. He was photographed at nightclubs and restaurants. Benjamin Siegel, the killer from Brooklyn, became a Hollywood figure, not hiding his criminal background exactly, but making it seem romantic. Dangerous in an exciting way rather than a terrifying way. This celebrity status served multiple purposes. It gave him legitimate social connections that could be useful for business. It made him seem more important and influential than he might actually have been. And it satisfied something in Benjamin's personality. His need to be noticed, to be admired, to be somebody. But it also created problems. The syndicate operated best in shadows. Public attention meant law enforcement attention. It meant newspapers writing about you. It meant your face becoming known. Meyer Lansky, back in New York, probably watched Benjamin's Hollywood adventures with mixed feelings. On one hand, Benjamin was successfully building West Coast operations. On the other hand, He was doing it in the most visible way possible. Benjamin's personal life during this period was complicated. He'd married a woman named Esther Krakauer in 1929. They had 2 daughters. But Benjamin was not a faithful husband. He had numerous affairs, including a particularly intense relationship with a woman named Virginia Hill. Virginia Hill was herself a fascinating figure, beautiful, sharp, connected to multiple organized crime figures. She and Benjamin had a relationship that was passionate, volatile, and ultimately destructive for both of them. Esther tolerated Benjamin's infidelities, or at least accepted them as part of being married to him. The marriage stayed intact, though increasingly strained. Through the late 1930s and early 1940s, Benjamin built his California empire. He was successful by criminal standards, making money, expanding operations, maintaining his connections to the syndicate back east. But he was also restless. Hollywood was exciting, but it wasn't entirely satisfying. Benjamin wanted something bigger, something that was truly his. A legacy project that would prove he was more than just muscle, more than just Meyer Lansky's friend, more than just another gangster who happened to be handsome. He started thinking about opportunities outside Los Angeles, about places where gambling was legal and where the right kind of development could create enormous profits. There was a place. A small desert town about 300 miles from Los Angeles, a place that had legalized gambling back in 1931 but hadn't quite figured out what to do with that legality. A place called Las Vegas. Chapter 3. The Desert and the Dream. Las Vegas in the early 1940s was not what it would become. It was a railroad stop, a small town with maybe 8,000 residents, a place where gambling was legal but unsophisticated. Fremont Street had some casinos, basic operations, nothing fancy, sawdust on the floors, cheap drinks, the kind of gambling halls you would expect in a frontier town, not in a modern city. But Benjamin Siegel, on visits to Las Vegas, saw something else. He saw potential. California was right next door. Millions of people in Los Angeles who liked to gamble but had to do it illegally. What if there was a legal alternative? What if you could drive a few hours and gamble openly without fear of police raids? More than that, what if the gambling wasn't in some dingy hall, but in a luxury resort? What if you combined gambling with entertainment, fine dining, beautiful accommodations? What if you made it glamorous? Benjamin wasn't the first person to think about developing Las Vegas. Mob figures back east had already recognized its potential. Some small investments had been made, but nobody had tried to build something truly ambitious. Benjamin started formulating a vision, a hotel casino that would be unlike anything Las Vegas had seen, something that would attract wealthy tourists, something that would make gambling feel sophisticated rather than sleazy. He started talking about this vision to Meyer Lansky, to other syndicate figures, to anyone who would listen. Most people were skeptical. Las Vegas was in the middle of nowhere. It was hot. There was no infrastructure. Building a luxury resort there seemed crazy. But Benjamin was persuasive. He pointed out the legal gambling, the proximity to California, the fact that you could operate openly without the constant fear of raids and arrests that plagued illegal gambling operations. He also had a specific opportunity. A Hollywood entrepreneur named Billy Wilkerson was developing a project. A hotel casino he called the Flamingo, named after his girlfriend's nickname. Wilkerson had taste. He developed several successful nightclubs in Los Angeles. He understood luxury and entertainment. But he was running out of money. Construction was expensive, and Wilkerson didn't have the capital to complete the project. Benjamin saw his chance. He approached Wilkerson with backing from syndicate investors. Initially, Benjamin was just a partner, providing money in exchange for a share of the project. But partnerships require compatible visions and compatible personalities. Wilkerson and Benjamin had neither. They clashed over design decisions, over budgets, over timelines, over everything. Eventually, Benjamin pushed Wilkerson out entirely. The Flamingo became Benjamin's project, his vision, his opportunity to prove he was more than just muscle. The concept was ambitious. The Flamingo would have luxury rooms, fine restaurants, top entertainment, beautiful landscaping, everything designed to make guests feel like they were staying at a world-class resort that happened to have a casino, rather than at a gambling hall that happened to have rooms. Benjamin threw himself into the project with characteristic intensity. He was involved in every detail. Design decisions, material choices, hiring, construction timelines, everything. This level of involvement revealed something about Benjamin. He had vision, yes. He understood aesthetics and luxury. He knew what wealthy tourists would want. But he had no experience actually managing a large construction project. No understanding of budgets and timelines and the 1,000 practical details that determine whether a project succeeds or fails. Benjamin was a gangster trying to be a developer. And the transition was not going smoothly. Construction costs exploded. The original budget was around $1 million. That quickly became $2 million, then $3 million, then $4 million, then $5 million. Eventually, the Flamingo would cost over $6 million, an astronomical sum for the time. Some of the cost increases were legitimate. Construction in the desert was expensive. Materials had to be shipped long distances. Labor was costly. Benjamin's vision of luxury required expensive materials and finishes. But there were also problems with management. Benjamin made impulsive changes. He would see something he didn't like and order it redone, regardless of the cost or timeline impact. He didn't have systems in place to prevent theft and waste on the construction site. Rumors started circulating that Benjamin was skimming money from the project, that he was taking cash meant for construction and using it for personal expenses or simply stealing it. Benjamin vehemently denied this. He insisted the cost overruns were due to his vision of quality, not to theft. Later analysis suggests he was probably telling the truth. The costs were inflated by poor management and expensive tastes, not by stealing. But truth mattered less than perception. And the perception, among the syndicate investors who were bankrolling the project, was that Benjamin was wasting their money. That $6 million was an outrageous amount to spend on a hotel casino in the middle of the desert. That Benjamin was either incompetent or crooked, and either way was a problem. Meyer Lansky tried to run interference. He'd known Benjamin since they were teenagers. He understood Benjamin's strengths and weaknesses. He argued to other investors that the vision was sound, that the cost would be recouped once the Flamingo opened and started generating profits. But even Meyer was worried. The budget had spiraled so far out of control that the project's viability was questionable, and Benjamin's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. He was stressed. He was defensive. He was making enemies among the very people whose continued support he needed. By late 1946, the Flamingo was nearing completion. At least nominally. Many parts of the resort weren't actually finished. But there was enough done that Benjamin decided to open anyway. The opening was scheduled for December 26, 1946, the day after Christmas. Benjamin sent invitations to Hollywood celebrities, to wealthy potential customers, to reporters and photographers. He envisioned a grand opening that would generate national publicity, that would establish the Flamingo as the premier destination in Las Vegas, that would prove all his skeptics wrong and show that his vision was correct. The opening was a disaster. Chapter 4. The Flamingo opens and everything goes wrong. December 26, 1946. The night that was supposed to launch Benjamin Siegel's legacy. The night that was supposed to prove Las Vegas could be glamorous. The night that was supposed to make the Flamingo Hotel the beginning of a new era. It rained, not just drizzled, poured, torrential rain in the desert, as if nature itself was mocking Benjamin's ambitions. The invited celebrities mostly didn't show up. Some couldn't fly in because of weather. Others decided a new casino in Las Vegas wasn't worth the trip. A few came, but not the crowd Benjamin had envisioned. The resort itself wasn't ready. Many rooms were still under construction. The air conditioning didn't work properly. Various systems failed. The place looked half-finished because it was half-finished. The casino, the core of the entire enterprise, had problems. Dealers made mistakes. The systems weren't properly tested. There was chaos instead of smooth operation. And then there were the guests who did show up. They won, significantly. The casino lost money on its opening night. The one thing that absolutely had to go right, the casino generating revenue, failed. Benjamin watched his grand opening fall apart in real time. All the planning, all the money, all the vision, and it was a disaster. The Flamingo stayed open for a few weeks, continuing to lose money. By early January, Benjamin made the decision to close temporarily. The official story was that they needed to complete construction. The reality was that the operation was failing and needed to be fixed before it could continue. The closure was supposed to be brief, a chance to finish the rooms, to fix the air conditioning, to train the staff properly, to get everything working smoothly. But to Benjamin's investors back east, the closure looked like failure. They'd poured millions into the project. Now it was closed, not generating any revenue, with no clear timeline for when it would reopen successfully. The syndicate bosses were furious. They'd trusted Benjamin with enormous amounts of money. He'd promised them a gold mine. Instead, he had delivered a money pit. Meetings were held in New York, in Chicago, and other cities where organized crime leaders gathered to discuss syndicate business. The topic was Benjamin Siegel and what to do about him. Some wanted him killed immediately. He'd wasted their money. He'd embarrassed them. He'd proven incompetent. In the mob's logic, these were all executable offenses. Others, notably Meyer Lansky, argued for patience. The vision was still sound, they argued. The Flamingo just needed better management. Give Benjamin time to fix the problems. Give the resort a chance to succeed. There was also the question of what happened to all the money. $6 million was an enormous sum. Where had it all gone? Was Benjamin stealing, or was he just terrible at managing construction and budgets? Investigations were conducted. Accountants reviewed the books. People familiar with construction costs analyzed whether $6 million was reasonable. The conclusion was ambiguous. Some money had definitely been wasted. Management had been poor. But there wasn't clear evidence of massive theft. The costs, while inflated, could be explained by Benjamin's expensive tastes and poor project management. This ambiguity probably saved Benjamin's life, at least temporarily. If investigators had found clear evidence of stealing, he would have been killed immediately. But the conclusion that he was incompetent rather than crooked gave Meyer and others room to argue for giving him another chance. The Flamingo reopened in March of 1947. This time, things went better. The resort was more finished. The systems worked. The casino started generating revenue. In fact, by late spring of 1947, the Flamingo was becoming profitable. Not enough to recoup the massive construction costs immediately, but enough to prove the concept could work. Benjamin felt vindicated. His vision had been correct. Yes. The opening had been a disaster. Yes, the cost had spiraled out of control. But the fundamental idea, a luxury resort casino in Las Vegas, was sound. The Flamingo was proof. He started planning expansion. More rooms, better entertainment, additional amenities. He was thinking about the future, about turning the Flamingo into the first of many luxury resorts in Las Vegas. But while Benjamin was planning the future, others were planning his death. Because the syndicate bosses had come to a decision. Benjamin Siegel had become more liability than asset. He'd wasted their money. He'd made them look foolish. He couldn't be trusted with further projects. More troubling, Benjamin's celebrity status and visibility made him a risk. He was too well known. If he were ever arrested and decided to cooperate with authorities to avoid prison, he could damage the entire syndicate. They couldn't risk it. The decision was made. Benjamin had to go. Meyer Lansky apparently argued against this decision. He and Benjamin had been friends since they were teenagers. They'd built the Bugs and Meyer mob together. They'd survived Prohibition together. They'd helped create the syndicate together. But even Meyer's influence had limits. and even Meyer may have recognized that Benjamin had become too unpredictable, too much of a risk, too problematic to protect any longer. The contract was issued. Someone, probably multiple someones, would carry it out. Benjamin Siegel would be assassinated. He didn't know it yet. He was still making plans, still thinking about the Flamingo's future, still believing he'd survived the crisis and proven his worth. He had 2 weeks left to live. Chapter 5. June 20th, 1947. Benjamin spent the early summer of 1947 mostly in California. The Flamingo was operating, generating revenue, beginning to prove itself. He was splitting time between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, managing the resort while also maintaining his personal life in California. His relationship with Virginia Hill was as intense as ever. Passionate, volatile, exhausting for both of them. They fought constantly. About money, about fidelity, about everything. Virginia had recently traveled to Europe. Some accounts suggest she left because she sensed danger coming, that she knew something was wrong and wanted to be far away when it happened. Others suggest she was just taking a vacation, that she traveled frequently and this trip was nothing unusual. Either way, she was gone. And Benjamin was staying at her Beverly Hills house, a beautiful home at 810 North Linden Drive. Expensive neighborhood, the kind of place that announced you'd made it. June 20th, 1947. A Friday. Benjamin was in Los Angeles. He'd spent the day doing normal things, visiting his barber, meeting with associates. Nothing unusual. That evening, he went to dinner at a restaurant with several people, including Alan Smiley, a mob associate and friend. They ate, talked, made plans. Everything was normal. After dinner, Benjamin and Alan returned to Virginia Hill's house. It was late, almost 10:30 at night. Benjamin settled into the living room, sitting on a chintz couch near a window. He was reading a newspaper, the Los Angeles Times. Alan Smiley was also in the room, just the two of them, relaxing, unwinding at the end of the day. Outside, in the darkness, someone approached the house. Someone with a rifle. Someone who'd been given a contract. Someone who was about to carry out one of the most famous mob hits in American history. The shooter positioned himself outside the window, had a clear view of Benjamin through the glass, aimed carefully, and fired. Multiple shots. The exact number is disputed. Accounts suggest 9 or 10 shots fired. Many of them hit Benjamin, in his head, in his body, with devastating effect. One shot, the shot that would become famous, struck Benjamin's right eye. The force literally blew the eye out of his head. It was later found 15 feet away from his body. Alan Smiley, sitting in the same room, was not hit. The shooting was precise, professional. The shooter knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't spray and pray. This was execution. Benjamin Siegel died instantly. There was no suffering, at least not physically. One moment he was reading the newspaper. The next moment he was gone. The shooter fled, melted into the Los Angeles night. No witnesses saw him clearly. No evidence was left behind that would identify him. It was as professional as the shooting itself. Police arrived. The scene was chaos. Photographers were called. The images taken that night, of Benjamin's body on the couch, of the gruesome wound where his eye had been, would become iconic. Famous mob murder scene photographs that would be reproduced in books and documentaries for decades. Alan Smiley was questioned extensively. He claimed to have no idea who shot Benjamin or why. He maintained that story for the rest of his life. Whether he really didn't know, or whether he was simply following the mob code of silence, remains unclear. The murder investigation went nowhere. Police had no solid leads, or if they did have leads, those leads pointed to organized crime figures who were untouchable. The case remains officially unsolved to this day. But everyone knew who was responsible. The syndicate. The same people who'd invested in the Flamingo. The same people who'd grown furious at Benjamin's management. The same people who'd decided he was too much of a liability to keep alive. The specific shooter's identity remains uncertain. Various names have been proposed over the years. Some believe it was a Chicago outfit hitman, since Chicago had invested heavily in the Flamingo. Others believe it was someone from the Los Angeles area, familiar with the territory and able to escape cleanly. One popular theory is that Frankie Carbo, a boxer and mob enforcer, was involved. Another theory points to various professional hitmen who worked for the syndicate. We'll probably never know for certain. The people who knew are dead. The records, if they ever existed, were destroyed or lost decades ago. What we do know is this: Benjamin Siegel was killed by organized crime. The syndicate ordered it, someone carried it out, and Benjamin, for all his charm and violence and vision, couldn't protect himself when his own organization turned against him. Chapter 6. The immediate aftermath. Here's something remarkable. Within hours of Benjamin's death, possibly even before his body had been removed from Virginia Hill's living room, two men walked into the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. Mo Sedway and Gus Greenbaum, both mob associates, both familiar with the Flamingo's operations. They announced they were taking over. Management change, effective immediately. The speed of the takeover suggests planning. They didn't just happen to show up in Las Vegas hours after Benjamin died. They'd been waiting, positioned, ready to step in the moment Benjamin was eliminated. This is one of the strongest pieces of evidence that the syndicate ordered Benjamin's death. The takeover was too smooth, too quick, too organized to be spontaneous. Under Sedway and Greenbaum's management, the Flamingo became very profitable. The vision Benjamin had was sound. The resort model he'd pioneered worked beautifully. It just worked better without Benjamin's chaotic management and expensive impulses. The syndicate investors started recouping their money. The $6 million disaster became a cash-generating asset. Everything Benjamin had promised, the Flamingo delivered. Just too late to save him. Benjamin's funeral was held in Los Angeles. The turnout was surprisingly small. In life, Benjamin had cultivated relationships with Hollywood celebrities, with prominent business figures, with people who'd enjoyed his parties and his company. In death, most of those people disappeared. They didn't want to be associated with the murdered mobster. They didn't want their names in newspapers connected to Benjamin Siegel's funeral. Esta, Benjamin's wife, attended. She'd been separated from Benjamin but never divorced. His daughters were there, some family members, a few loyal friends. But the Hollywood crowd Benjamin had so carefully courted stayed away. The celebrities whose parties he'd attended, whose friendships he'd valued, didn't come. In death, Benjamin was a gangster, and gangsters were buried by other gangsters, and by families who had no choice. Meyer Lansky allegedly didn't attend. Whether because he was advised to stay away, or because the grief was too much, or because attending would have been politically complicated within the syndicate, we don't know. But the man who'd been Benjamin's closest friend since they were teenagers, who'd built a mob together, who tried to protect Benjamin when others wanted him killed, wasn't there. Or at least, wasn't visibly there. Benjamin was buried in a Jewish cemetery in Los Angeles. The gravestone is simple. Not the monument you'd expect for someone who'd imagine building a luxury empire. Back in Las Vegas, the Flamingo thrived. The model Benjamin had pioneered, luxury resort combined with casino, became the template for everything that followed. The Sahara opened in 1952, the Sands in 1953. The Desert Inn had actually opened before the Flamingo, but expanded following its model. The Dunes, the Tropicana, eventually Caesar's Palace, and all the mega resorts that define modern Las Vegas. Every single one of them built on Benjamin's vision. The idea that gambling could be glamorous, that a casino didn't have to be a dingy hall, but could be part of a luxury resort. That entertainment and fine dining and beautiful accommodations could combine with gambling to create something people would travel across the country to experience. Benjamin had been right about all of it. His timing was just slightly off. He tried to build his vision before the market was quite ready, before the logistics were fully worked out, before he personally had the skills to execute what he was imagining. If he'd lived another 5 years, he might have succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. The Las Vegas boom of the 1950s would have vindicated everything he'd believed. But he didn't live another 5 years. He barely lived another few months after the Flamingo's successful reopening. His vision survived. His execution didn't. And in the mob, execution is everything. Chapter 7. Theories and Unanswered Questions. The murder of Benjamin Siegel has generated theories and speculation for more than 70 years. Some questions have partial answers. Others remain complete mysteries. The first question: who specifically ordered the hit? The likely answer is that it wasn't one person. The syndicate operated by consensus, at least for major decisions like eliminating one of their own. A meeting probably occurred where various mob bosses discussed Benjamin's situation. Arguments were made for and against killing him. Eventually, enough people agreed that the decision was made. Chicago almost certainly supported the hit. They'd invested heavily in the Flamingo and felt betrayed by Benjamin's mismanagement. New York families probably agreed, though Meyer Lansky apparently tried to argue against it. Cleveland and other cities with syndicate investments likely concurred. It was a board decision, corporate, almost. Remove an underperforming executive. Except the removal involved murder rather than a severance package. The second question: did Meyer Lansky order Benjamin's death? Popular culture often depicts Meyer as the man who killed his best friend. The cold, calculating accountant who put business ahead of personal loyalty. But most historians believe Meyer actually tried to save Benjamin, that he argued for giving Benjamin more time, that he used his influence to delay the inevitable. Meyer couldn't save Benjamin in the end, but he likely tried. The two men had too much history, too many years of friendship, for Meyer to casually order Benjamin's death. That Meyer failed to protect Benjamin says something about the limits of friendship in organized crime. Loyalty only goes so far. When someone becomes too much of a liability, even the closest friends can't shield them forever. The third question: was Benjamin stealing from the Flamingo? This question has major implications. If Benjamin was stealing, he deserved death by mob logic. He'd betrayed his investors. In organized crime, stealing from your partners is unforgivable. But the evidence suggests Benjamin wasn't stealing, at least not in any major way. The costs were inflated because of his expensive tastes, his poor management, his constant design changes. He was wasting money, not stealing it. This distinction probably didn't matter much to the syndicate bosses. Whether Benjamin stole $6 million or wasted $6 million, the result was the same. Their money was gone. But for Benjamin's legacy, it matters. Incompetence is less damning than theft. It means he failed not because of corruption, but because he was attempting something beyond his capabilities. The fourth question: who pulled the trigger? This is the murder mystery question everyone wants answered. Who actually killed Benjamin Siegel? Various names have been suggested over the decades. Frankie Carbo, a mob enforcer with ties to both boxing and organized crime. A Chicago outfit hitman whose name was never publicly revealed. Someone from the Los Angeles underworld hired specifically for the job. Jack Dragna, the Los Angeles mob boss who may have resented Benjamin's presence in his territory. But we don't know. The shooter was professional enough to leave no evidence. The investigation went nowhere. Anyone who knew stayed silent. It's possible the truth was known within mob circles, that people whispered the name to each other. But those people are dead now. The secret, if there ever was one, died with them. The fifth question: did Virginia Hill know it was coming? Virginia's trip to Europe, just before Benjamin was killed, seemed suspicious. Did she sense the danger? Did someone warn her? Or was it just coincidence? She traveled frequently. Maybe this trip meant nothing beyond wanting to vacation in Europe. Some accounts suggest Virginia was warned by mob associates, that she was told to be far away when the hit happened. She apparently loved Benjamin, in her complicated way. Maybe someone showed her mercy by ensuring she wasn't there to witness his death. Other accounts suggest she had no idea, that she was in Europe for unrelated reasons and was shocked to learn what had happened. We'll never know for certain. Virginia Hill died in 1966 in Austria of an apparent drug overdose. She never publicly revealed whether she'd known Benjamin was in danger. Chapter 8. The Myth and the Reality. Over the decades since his death, Benjamin Siegel has become a legend. The reality and the myth have blended together into something that's part history and part fiction. The myth goes something like this. Benjamin was a visionary genius who single-handedly invented Las Vegas. He saw what the desert could become and made it happen through sheer force of will. He was murdered by jealous rivals who couldn't appreciate his brilliance. The reality is more complicated. Benjamin didn't invent Las Vegas. The city had legal gambling before he arrived. There were casinos operating on Fremont Street. Other mob figures had already recognized Las Vegas's potential. What Benjamin did was pioneer the luxury resort model. He proved that casinos didn't have to be low-rent operations, that you could combine gambling with genuine luxury and attract wealthy tourists. This was innovative, important. But it wasn't creating Las Vegas from nothing. It was evolving what already existed. The myth says Benjamin was a brilliant businessman murdered by short-sighted mob bosses who couldn't understand his vision. The reality is that Benjamin was a terrible businessman. He had vision, yes. He understood aesthetics and customer experience. But he couldn't manage budgets. He couldn't stick to plans. He made impulsive decisions that wasted enormous amounts of money. The mob bosses who killed him weren't short-sighted. They were protecting their investment after Benjamin had proven he couldn't be trusted with it. The myth says Benjamin was some kind of romantic figure, a gangster with a heart of gold, a bad boy who was really good underneath. The reality is that Benjamin was a killer. He'd murdered people, multiple people, not in self-defense or by accident, as part of his job in organized crime. He could be charming, he could be generous with friends, he could be loving with his children. All of that was real, but so was the violence, the intimidation, the willingness to hurt people to achieve his goals. You can't separate the charming Benjamin from the violent Benjamin. They were the same person. The myth says Benjamin's death was tragic, a visionary cut down before he could fulfill his potential. The reality is that Benjamin's death was inevitable. He'd made too many enemies. He'd proven unreliable. He lived in a world where failure had lethal consequences, and he failed spectacularly. If Benjamin had succeeded with the Flamingo, if the opening had been smooth, if the cost had been controlled, if he'd proven himself competent, he probably would have lived. He would have built more resorts. He would have become legitimately wealthy and powerful. But he didn't succeed. He failed. And in the mob, failure is often fatal. Understanding the gap between myth and reality doesn't diminish Benjamin's story. If anything, it makes him more interesting. The mythological Benjamin is a one-dimensional hero. Brilliant, wronged, romantic. The real Benjamin is complex, ambitious but undisciplined, visionary but incapable of execution, charming but violent, loving but unfaithful, confident but ultimately out of his depth. The real Benjamin is human, flawed in ways that doomed him but also made him capable of imagining something nobody else had quite imagined. He dreamed of a glamorous Las Vegas. He dreamed of luxury resorts in the desert. He dreamed of transforming gambling from vice into entertainment. And those dreams came true. Just not in time to save him. Just not in ways that he benefited from. His legacy is built on foundations he laid but never saw completed. That's the real tragedy of Benjamin Siegel. Not that he was killed by jealous rivals, but that he was killed for failure, and his failures were transformed into enormous successes by the people who took over after his death. He was almost right. Almost successful. Almost great. In another timeline, with better management skills or better timing or better luck, Benjamin Siegel becomes one of the most successful businessmen in Las Vegas history. In this timeline, he becomes a cautionary tale, a legend, a mystery, a man whose vision outlived him and whose death remains one of the most famous unsolved murders in American history. Chapter 9. The Hollywood Ending That Never Happened. If Benjamin's life were a movie, and it became one, eventually, you'd want to write a better ending. Something that honored the complexity of his character and gave his story proper closure. Maybe in that movie version, Benjamin survives the attempts to kill him. He goes into hiding, resurfaces years later, watches as Las Vegas becomes exactly what he envisioned. He gets to see his dream realized, even if he can't directly participate. Or maybe Benjamin gets a redemption arc. He realizes he's in danger, cooperates with authorities, provides information that helps dismantle the syndicate. He goes into witness protection, lives quietly somewhere, finds peace away from the violence. Or maybe there's a twist. Benjamin faked his own death. The body in Beverly Hills was someone else. Benjamin is living in South America or Europe or somewhere far from organized crime, having successfully escaped with money he'd hidden. These would all be more satisfying endings than what actually happened. They'd give Benjamin's story a resolution that feels earned, a conclusion that speaks to themes of redemption or justice or clever survival. But real life doesn't provide Hollywood endings. Real life is messier, more abrupt, less concerned with narrative satisfaction. Benjamin Siegel was reading a newspaper in a living room. Someone shot him. He died instantly. No final words, no realization of his fate, no dramatic conclusion. One moment he existed, the next moment he didn't. All the charm and violence and vision and dreams ended in a fraction of a second. There's a brutality to that ending, a randomness, almost, except it wasn't random. It was carefully planned and professionally executed. But from Benjamin's perspective, it must have felt random. He had no warning, no chance to fight back or run or even understand what was happening. The movie Bugsy, released in 1991, tried to romanticize Benjamin's story. Warren Beatty played him as charming and visionary. Annette Bening played Virginia Hill. The film made the Flamingo project seem more successful than it was. It made Benjamin seem more sympathetic than he probably deserved. But the movie couldn't escape the ending, couldn't give Benjamin a Hollywood finale. Because everyone knows how the story ends, in violence, in Beverly Hills, with photographs that became iconic precisely because of their brutality. The film tried to make the ending mean something, to suggest that Benjamin's death was the price of his vision, that he died so Las Vegas could be born. That's poetic. But it's not accurate. Benjamin died because he failed and became a liability. Las Vegas would have developed with or without him. His specific contribution was important, but not irreplaceable. The truth is less romantic, but more interesting. Benjamin was a man who attempted something beyond his capabilities. He failed. His failure had consequences. Those consequences were fatal, but his vision, separate from his execution, was sound. Other people, more skilled at management, took that vision and made it real. The Flamingo succeeded. Las Vegas boomed. Everything Benjamin had imagined came to pass. Just without him. Just too late for him. Just in a form that he contributed to but didn't control. If there's a Hollywood ending to Benjamin Siegel's story, it's not his ending. It's Las Vegas's ending. The city he helped envision became one of the most successful entertainment destinations in the world. Millions of people visit every year. Billions of dollars flow through its casinos. The Strip. Benjamin imagined luxury resorts, world-class entertainment, glamorous gambling exists. It's real. You can visit it today. Benjamin's not there to see it. But his vision is. In every luxury hotel casino, in every show and restaurant and experience that makes Las Vegas special. That's the closest thing to a Hollywood ending this story has. The dream survived the dreamer. The vision outlived the visionary. Las Vegas became what Benjamin Siegel imagined, even though he never got to enjoy it. It's not the ending Benjamin would have wanted, but it's the ending his story deserved. Because Benjamin's true contribution wasn't building the Flamingo, it was imagining what the Flamingo represented, what Las Vegas could be. Other people executed that vision. Other people built the empire. But Benjamin was the one who dreamed it first, who looked at desert and saw paradise, who understood that gambling could be glamorous. That vision was his legacy, more lasting than any hotel, more influential than any single resort, more important than whether he personally succeeded or failed. The dream mattered. The dream survived. The dream became reality. Benjamin Siegel died, but his dream lives on in every neon light on the Strip. The Chapter 10. The People Left Behind. When Benjamin died, he left behind people whose lives were forever changed by his death and by the choices that led to it. Esther, his wife, was left to raise their daughters alone. She tolerated Benjamin's infidelities and his criminal life. Now she had to explain to their children why their father was murdered, why he wasn't coming home. Esther never remarried. She lived quietly, away from any connection to organized crime. She protected her daughters from the worst of Benjamin's legacy. By all accounts, she was a good mother who did her best in difficult circumstances. Benjamin's daughters, Millicent and Barbara, grew up carrying their father's name. Siegel, a name that was famous and infamous, a name that people recognized but that you probably didn't want to be associated with. They apparently lived normal lives, married, had families, stayed away from anything connected to organized crime. They were children when Benjamin died. His choices weren't their choices, but they lived with the consequences anyway. That's often how it works. The people who make terrible decisions don't suffer alone. Their families suffer too. Virginia Hill, Benjamin's mistress, was in Europe when he died. She returned to America briefly, then spent most of the rest of her life abroad. She was questioned extensively about Benjamin's finances, about whether she knew where money was hidden, about who might have killed him. She claimed ignorance, maybe truthfully, maybe not. She'd been deeply involved in Benjamin's life. She'd helped manage some of his finances. She knew people in organized crime. But she was also smart enough to know that talking too much would put her in danger. So she said little, protected herself, moved on as best she could. Virginia died in 1966. She was only 49. The official cause was an overdose of sleeping pills. Whether accidental or intentional remains unclear. She'd lived hard. Multiple relationships with dangerous men. Constant pressure from law enforcement. The trauma of Benjamin's murder. Years of heavy drinking and drug use. Her death, like Benjamin's, was sudden and sad. Another life cut short. Another person who'd been part of the world Benjamin inhabited and couldn't quite escape it. Meyer Lansky lived for decades after Benjamin's death. He became one of the most powerful figures in organized crime. He developed international casino operations. He pioneered money laundering techniques. He became known as the mob's accountant. But he apparently never forgot Benjamin. They'd been friends for more than 25 years. They'd built criminal empires together. They'd survived Prohibition and the mob wars and everything else. Meyer had tried to save Benjamin and failed. That failure must have weighed on him. In a world where loyalty often meant nothing, Meyer had been loyal. But even loyalty had limits when someone became too much of a liability. Did Meyer regret not protecting Benjamin better? Did he think about what might have been if Benjamin had just managed the Flamingo competently? We'll never know. Meyer didn't discuss his feelings publicly, but in the calculus of organized crime, Benjamin's death was probably necessary from Meyer's perspective. The syndicate couldn't tolerate the kind of problems Benjamin created. Personal feelings had to be secondary to organizational survival. The people who took over the Flamingo, Mo Sedway and Gus Greenbaum, profited from Benjamin's failure. They ran the resort successfully. They made money for themselves and for the syndicate investors. Gus Greenbaum's story ended badly too. He was murdered in 1958 in his own bed in Phoenix, along with his wife. The mob suspected he was skimming, the same accusation that had followed Benjamin. The world Benjamin inhabited was violent. Almost everyone who was part of it died violently or in prison. That was the expected outcome, the cost of living that life. Benjamin's family, the people who loved him despite his flaws, had to carry that legacy forward. They had to live with being connected to someone famous for being murdered, connected to someone who'd helped build Las Vegas, but who died before seeing his vision realized. That's its own kind of tragedy. Not as dramatic as Benjamin's death, but persistent, lasting, a weight that doesn't go away just because years pass. Chapter 11. What Las Vegas Became. To understand Benjamin Siegel's legacy, you have to understand what Las Vegas became. Not what it was when he died in 1947, but what it evolved into over the following decades. The 1950s saw explosive growth. New casinos opened regularly. The Sahara, the Sands, the Desert Inn expanded, the Dunes, the Tropicana. Each one followed the model Benjamin had pioneered with the Flamingo. Luxury accommodations, top entertainment, fine dining, professional casino operations. The mob controlled most of these properties, either directly or through hidden ownership. The skimming operations that would later become famous were happening at most major casinos. Millions of dollars in untaxed profits flowing to crime families in Chicago, New York, Kansas City, Cleveland. But the public didn't know that, or didn't care. They saw glamorous resorts. They saw Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack performing at the Sands. They saw Elvis at the International. They saw championship boxing matches and world-class entertainment. Las Vegas became America's playground, a place where you could do things that weren't possible anywhere else. Gamble legally. See incredible shows. Experience a level of luxury that was rare outside of major cities. The 1960s continued the expansion. Caesar's Palace opened in 1966 and took luxury to another level. The architecture was more ambitious. The amenities were better. The scale was larger. Throughout all of this, Benjamin's basic vision remained unchanged. Gambling combined with luxury. Entertainment combined with resort amenities, making vice feel sophisticated. By the 1970s, corporate America started buying Las Vegas. Howard Hughes purchased multiple properties. Legitimate companies recognized the profit potential. The mob's grip on the casino started loosening. The 1980s saw the rise of mega resorts. The Mirage opened in 1989 and changed everything again. Bigger, more expensive, more ambitious. Steve Wynn had studied what worked in Las Vegas and amplified it. The 1990s brought themed resorts: Luxor, Excalibur, New York, Paris, Venetian, each one creating an immersive experience, making the resort itself as much of an attraction as the gambling. The 2000s brought ultra-luxury: the Bellagio, Wynn, Encore, properties that competed with the finest hotels anywhere in the world, where rooms cost thousands per night and attracted genuinely wealthy clientele. Throughout all of this evolution, Benjamin's original insight remained foundational. Las Vegas wasn't just about gambling. It was about the experience, the luxury, the entertainment, the feeling that you were somewhere special. Every mega resort that opened, every luxury hotel casino that succeeded, was built on the model Benjamin pioneered with the Flamingo. Not directly. Most modern resorts far exceed anything Benjamin imagined. But the core concept remains the same. Make gambling glamorous. Combine it with luxury. Create a destination that people travel to experience, not just to gamble. That was Benjamin's gift to Las Vegas, not the Flamingo itself, which is still operating but has been rebuilt and renovated so many times that almost nothing original remains. But the concept, the vision, the understanding of what could make Las Vegas special. Modern Las Vegas generates tens of billions of dollars annually. It employs hundreds of thousands of people. It's one of the most visited cities in America. It's a global brand that represents entertainment and luxury and, yes, gambling. Benjamin Siegel didn't build all of that, but he helped set it in motion. He proved the concept could work. He He showed that desert land could become prime real estate if you built the right kind of destination. Others executed better than he did. Others built bigger and more successfully. But Benjamin was there first, trying to build something that nobody had quite built before. That pioneering role is his legacy. Not success. He failed in the immediate term. But vision. The ability to see what others couldn't see, to imagine what didn't exist yet. Las Vegas exists because of many people. Howard Hughes, Steve Wynn, Sheldon Adelson, countless others who invested billions and built the modern Strip. But Benjamin was there at the beginning, when Las Vegas was still just a small desert town, when the Strip was just a highway, when the idea of luxury resort casinos seemed crazy. He believed when others doubted. He invested when others hesitated. He built when others thought he was wasting his time and money. And he was right. Not about the Flamingo succeeding under his management. He was wrong about that. But about Las Vegas becoming something special. About the Strip becoming a destination. About gambling becoming glamorous. He was right about all of it. He just didn't live long enough to see being right. Chapter 12. The Unsolved Mystery. 77 years have passed since Benjamin Siegel was murdered. The case remains officially unsolved. The Beverly Hills Police Department never closed it. But they also never made any arrests. This isn't particularly surprising. Mob murders rarely get solved. The shooters are professionals who leave minimal evidence. The witnesses either don't exist or refuse to talk. The people who ordered the hit are insulated by layers of deniability. But the high-profile nature of Benjamin's murder has kept people interested. Journalists have investigated. Historians have researched. True crime enthusiasts have theorized. Some claim to know who pulled the trigger. Names have been offered over the decades. Frankie Carbo, Eddie Cannizaro, unknown Chicago hitmen, Los Angeles mob figures. But claiming to know and actually knowing are different things. Without evidence, without confessions, without documentation, these are just theories. Educated guesses based on who had access, who had skills, who might have been chosen for the job. The mob's code of silence protected the killer, whoever he was. Nobody talked. Nobody betrayed the organization. The secret stayed secret. In 1991, when the movie Bugsy was released, interest in Benjamin's murder spiked again. Reporters tried to find new leads. They interviewed aging mob figures who might know something. They found nothing new. The people who knew were dead or weren't talking. The trail had gone cold decades earlier. Some mob figures, in their later years, hinted at knowledge. They suggested they knew who did it. They implied they'd been told by someone who was there. But they never gave names, never provided details that could be verified. This is frustrating for people who want closure, who want mysteries solved, who want justice, even if that justice comes 77 years late. But perhaps the unsolved nature of Benjamin's murder is fitting. It keeps his story alive. It makes him more mysterious. It allows the legend to grow beyond what the reality was. If the murder had been solved in 1947, Benjamin would be a footnote, another gangster killed by his own organization. Nothing special. But an unsolved murder, one of the most famous mob hits in American history, that's different. That keeps people interested. That makes Benjamin Siegel a name people recognize. The mystery also protects the truth, whatever that truth is. If we knew exactly who killed Benjamin and why, the story becomes simpler, less interesting, more mundane. The mystery allows for complexity, for multiple theories, for the possibility that the truth is more interesting than any single explanation. Maybe Benjamin was killed because he wasted money. Maybe because he was suspected of informing. Maybe because he made personal enemies. Maybe because the syndicate wanted to send a message. Maybe for reasons that had nothing to do with the Flamingo. We don't know. We'll never know. And that uncertainty is part of Benjamin's legacy. The man who dreamed in neon died in violence. The specifics remain mysterious. The impact remains clear. That's the final summary of Benjamin Siegel's life. Mystery and impact, dreams and violence, vision and failure, all mixed together in ways that can't be cleanly separated. He remains famous precisely because we can't fully understand him, can't fully explain why he succeeded in some ways and failed in others, can't solve the basic mystery of who he really was beneath the charm and violence. Benjamin Siegel. Bugsy, the gangster who helped build Las Vegas, the visionary who couldn't execute his own vision, the man who died too soon to see his dream realized. His murder remains unsolved, his legacy remains complicated, his story remains fascinating, and Las Vegas, the city he helped create, keeps growing, keeps evolving, keeps becoming more of what Benjamin imagined that night in the desert when he looked at empty land and saw paradise. Chapter 13. Lessons from a Gangster's Life. What can we learn from Benjamin Siegel's story? What universal truths, if any, emerge from this specific life? First, vision without execution is fantasy. Benjamin could imagine the future of Las Vegas. He could see what didn't exist yet. But seeing isn't building. Dreaming isn't delivering. He tried to execute his vision but lacked the skills. He couldn't manage budgets. He couldn't stick to plans. He couldn't separate his expensive taste from business necessity. So his vision remained partially realized. Other people, with better execution skills, made it real. Benjamin got the credit for imagining it. They got the credit for building it. The lesson: vision is valuable but insufficient. You also need discipline, management skills, and the ability to turn dreams into actionable plans. Second, charm only protects you so far. Benjamin was extraordinarily charismatic. He could walk into rooms and become the center of attention. He could make friends easily. He could convince people to give him chances. But charm doesn't excuse failure. When Benjamin wasted millions of mob dollars, his personality couldn't save him. When he became a liability, being likable didn't matter. The lesson? Relationships built on charm alone are fragile. Real loyalty requires more than just being enjoyable to be around. It requires competence, reliability, delivering on promises. Third, the worlds we inhabit have rules, and breaking those rules has consequences. Benjamin lived in the world of organized crime. That world had specific rules: waste money, you get killed; become a liability, you get killed; can't be trusted, you get killed. Benjamin broke the rules. Maybe not intentionally. He probably thought he was managing the Flamingo as best he could. But intentions don't matter. Results matter. And his results broke the rules? The lesson: understand the rules of the worlds you operate in. They might not be fair. They might not be explicit. But they exist. And ignoring them because you don't like them doesn't make them go away. Fourth, legacy is strange and unpredictable. Benjamin failed to successfully complete the Flamingo project. He died in disgrace. His mob bosses considered him incompetent. But his legacy is enormous. He's remembered as a founder of modern Las Vegas. The Flamingo still operates. His vision shaped an entire city. None of that was guaranteed. If the Flamingo had failed completely, if Las Vegas hadn't boomed, Benjamin would be a forgotten criminal. But circumstances worked out in ways that preserved and amplified his contribution. The lesson: you can't entirely control your legacy. What you're remembered for depends partly on what happens after you're gone, on whether your ideas prove valuable over time, on whether the world evolves in directions that make your contributions seem important. Fifth, the gap between myth and reality grows over time. The real Benjamin was complicated, violent and charming, visionary and incompetent, loving and unfaithful. The mythological Benjamin is simpler, either a romantic gangster hero or violent criminal, depending on the story being told. The complexity gets smoothed away. The lesson: historical figures become symbols. We simplify them to make them fit our narratives, but the simplification loses truth. The real people are messier, more contradictory, more human than the legends we create. Sixth, timing matters more than we like to admit. Benjamin's vision of Las Vegas was correct, but his timing was slightly off. He tried to build luxury resorts before the market was quite ready, before the infrastructure existed, before Vegas had the tourist traffic to support what he was building. 5 years later, his exact same vision would have succeeded easily. The Flamingo would have been profitable from day one. Benjamin would have lived and thrived. But 5 years can't be bridged through force of will. You can be right about the future and still fail because you're too early. The lesson, being ahead of your time, is only valuable if you can survive until the time catches up. Otherwise, you're just early, and early is often indistinguishable from wrong. These lessons emerge from Benjamin's specific story, but they apply broadly to business, to creativity, to any kind of ambitious project. Vision is necessary but insufficient. Charm helps but doesn't replace competence. Rules exist and have consequences. Legacy is unpredictable. Myth diverges from reality. Timing matters. Benjamin Siegel demonstrated all of these truths through his life and death. Not intentionally. He wasn't trying to teach lessons. He was just trying to build a casino and make his mark. But we can learn from his experiences anyway, from his successes and failures, from the gap between what he attempted and what he achieved. That might be the most valuable part of his legacy. Not the Flamingo itself, not even the vision of Las Vegas, but the lessons embedded in his story. The universal truths that emerged from one specific life, lived intensely and ended violently. Chapter 14. The Final Accounting. How do we judge Benjamin Siegel? What's the final accounting of his life? By criminal standards, he was successful for most of his life. He made money. He had power. He had respect within organized crime. He lived well. He experienced things most people never experience. Until he didn't. Until he failed. Until his organization killed him for that failure. By legitimate standards, he was a disaster. He murdered people. He built criminal enterprises. He corrupted legitimate businesses. He hurt people and communities. The Flamingo, his attempt at something almost legitimate, failed under his management. Even his best effort to build something lasting was botched. By Las Vegas standards, he's a founder, one of the people who shaped the city's identity. His vision influenced everything that came after. His name is still attached to the beginning of the modern strip. By Hollywood standards, he's a character, a role for Warren Beatty, a story that gets retold, a gangster who was handsome and charming enough to seem romantic despite being a killer. All of these judgments are true, and all of them are incomplete. Benjamin was a person, complicated, contradictory, capable of both great vision and terrible decisions, loving to his children and violent to his enemies, charming to friends and terrifying to people who crossed him. He wanted to be successful. He wanted to build something lasting. He wanted respect and wealth and all the things people pursue. He achieved some of that. The respect was real, for most of his life. The wealth came and went. The lasting achievement, his influence on Las Vegas, came after his death and in spite of his management. If Benjamin could see Las Vegas today, what would he think? Would he be proud that his vision came true? Angry that others profited from it while he died in failure? Amazed at how big and successful the strip became? Probably all of those things. Benjamin was never simple. Why would his response to his own legacy be simple? He'd probably be proud of the Flamingo, still operating 77 years after he started building it. Even though it's been completely rebuilt, even though nothing of his original vision physically remains. He'd probably be amazed at the scale of modern Vegas. Resorts that cost billions of dollars, casinos that dwarf anything he could have imagined, entertainment that's world-class by any standard, He'd probably be angry that he didn't get to participate, that others became wealthy and powerful by following the path he started, that he died just as his vision was beginning to work. But he'd also probably understand, on some level, why he was killed. He failed. He cost powerful people enormous amounts of money. In the world he chose to inhabit, that meant death. He made his choices. He lived with them as long as he could. Then he died because of them. That's the final accounting of Benjamin Siegel's life. Not a success story. Not exactly a failure story. Something in between. Something more complicated. He was a gangster who dreamed in neon, who saw paradise in the desert, who tried to build something that outlasts the violence of his life. He succeeded and failed simultaneously. His vision outlived him. His execution killed him. His legacy grew from his failures. Las Vegas is Benjamin Siegel's monument. Not intentionally. Not in any way he planned. But the city exists, in part, because he tried to build something, because he imagined what could be, because he invested money and effort into making that imagination real. He didn't finish. Others finished for him. But he started. He pushed. He insisted on luxury and glamour when others thought desert casinos should be basic. That insistence, that vision, that refusal to accept Las Vegas as it was, that changed everything. Benjamin Siegel died in Beverly Hills, shot through a window. Life ended instantly. No final words, no last realization, just sudden violence and then nothing. But his dream didn't die. His vision kept growing. His influence kept spreading. The neon he imagined kept lighting up more of the desert. That's the final accounting. The dream survived the dreamer. The vision outlasted the visionary. Las Vegas became what Benjamin Siegel imagined, even though he never got to see it. He was flawed, violent, undisciplined, incompetent in crucial ways, but also visionary. Bold, willing to attempt what others thought impossible. History remembers him for the attempt, for the vision, for helping to create something that millions of people enjoy. It also remembers him for the violence, for the failure, for the brutal death that became iconic. Both memories are valid. Both are part of who Benjamin was and what he accomplished. The gangster who helped build Las Vegas, the visionary who couldn't execute his own vision, the man who dreamed in neon and died before the dream could save him. That's Benjamin Siegel. That's his story. That's his legacy. Complicated, contradictory, compelling, still fascinating 77 years after his death, still remembered, still discussed, still part of the fabric of Las Vegas history. The accountant's accounting is never quite finished. The dream keeps evolving. The neon keeps lighting up the night. And somewhere in all of it, Benjamin Siegel's vision remains. Not pure anymore. Not exactly what he imagined. But present. Influential. Part of what makes Las Vegas what it is. He failed. But his failure succeeded. He died. But his dream lived. He became a cautionary tale, but also an inspiration. That's the complexity of legacy. That's the strange accounting of a life lived at extremes. Benjamin Siegel, Bugsy, the gangster who dreamed in neon, forever a part of Las Vegas, forever part of American crime history. Forever complicated, forever fascinating, gone but not forgotten. Failed but somehow successful. Dead but still influencing the living city he helped imagine into existence. That's the final word, except it's not final, because Benjamin's story keeps being told, keeps being reinterpreted, keeps being part of how we understand Las Vegas, and organized crime and American ambition. The story never quite ends, just like the neon in Las Vegas, just like the dream Benjamin had when he looked at desert and saw paradise. The dream continues, the neon glows, the story lives on, and Benjamin Siegel, dead since 1947, remains part of it all. Forever the gangster who dreamed in neon. Forever the man who helped build the city that never sleeps. That's his legacy. That's his story. That's the final accounting of a complicated life that ended in violence, but created something beautiful.